But anyways, Overwatch. What to kind of think about what to do. We said Ana. We're going to look at Crimzo for this one particularly. Now, I said that I'm going to try something a little bit different today. What am I going to try different here? Ooh, I'm trying to like get my Epic Pen in here. Perfect. So, if you remember in the past, I used to actually write this out and talk to you guys as we were going through it. So what I'm going to do instead is, instead of me talking and typing through and everything, I'm just going to open this up. I have this already pre-written down for you guys. I'm just going to open up chat on my phone here just because for some reason when I do the Blackboard, it disables both my monitors and puts it in Blackboard mode, so I can't see anything on my second monitor. So I'll have like it open on the side if people have questions. But we're going to do it like this. I'm going to circle what I'm kind of going through. I'm going to change as well real quick. So before that, I'm going to also change which one I do because my profile or my picture kind of cuts stuff off with that. So we're Blackboard. We're ready to go. We're ready to do some learning. We're going to look at Ana. So I have a few points here. So we have one for each of her abilities, Nade, Sleep, and Nano Boost. And then we have 3 key things to kind of focus on. So how can we aim better with Ana? When should we choose which style to aim with? Unscope versus scoped. How can we position as Ana? How do we move? How do we assess what our threats are? The characters that can pretty much insta-kill us or that will be a large threat to us. So first things first, you guys know how I like to do this. I like to start from left to right. So we'll go left, we'll go right, and then we'll do Nano Boost at the bottom last. And I will circle so that you guys know. Ooh. Let's see if I can do this right. I'll circle which ones I go through. Circle doesn't seem to be wanting to work. How about rectangle? Does rectangle work? Rectangle works, perfect. We'll rectangle each one that I go through, and it'll be highlighted in yellow, the focus for what I'm talking about. So we're going to start off with aim style for Ana, scoping versus unscoping. So we'll kind of break it through, and some of this stuff might seem pretty simple to you guys, but I'll try to kind of add some points in here that you guys don't really have or don't really know. So bear with me as I kind of talk and go through this sort of stuff. So looking at Ana, a lot of people, in my opinion, struggle of knowing when they should scope in on Ana and when to use her unscope. So the first thing that we kind of have to look at is I use scope usually more so for longer range. So if they're a very long distance away, and unscope when they're closer. This is just because of how both aim styles kind of go. So when you're in scope, you're more of a hit scan. So it's not a projectile based thing. It instantly hits and it kind of does the dot damage or dot heal. Whereas when you're unscoped, it's a projectile. So you need to kind of aim and then it'll shoot its way towards there. It won't be instantaneous. So again, looking at long range versus close, the reason why I kind of say, well, I want to scope mostly at long range is because if you're very far from the target and you're shooting unscoped, again, that's a projectile. It takes some time to land to where you want to go. So it's better to use that scope because not just to see a little bit better, but also so that you can have that instant healing go off. Because again, the projectile is going to take a little bit of time to either deal damage or heal your suggested target there. To add to that as well, right, something that I kind of didn't talk about aside from the range is character models. So for example, if you're maybe a farther range, like a longer range back, you don't have to scope in all the time. You can unscope if you're healing tanks, for example, because think about it like this. If you were healing a damage dealer, right, let's think the damage dealer is like this, just a small circle in my hand here. This is the size of maybe a damage dealer. It's small, so it's harder to hit. Now a tank, I use both hands, it's this size. It's obviously easier to kind of target this bigger circle than it is this tiny circle here, right? So when we're looking to use scope or unscope, again, distance is a big indicator of when you should, based off of, again, it being a projectile versus being hit scan, so instantaneous versus it taking a little bit of time, but also how big a target is to hit. If a target's bigger to hit, you can not use, you can make it so that you don't use the time to kind of have to scope in. You can just look to just consistently heal them. Because remember, scope is not instantaneous. It takes a little bit of time to scope in. Now, the last thing to kind of determine those two is you need to think about when you're safe or you're not safe. So a lot of the time when you want to scope in, once you're scoping in, you can see directly in front of you, but it's not a very clear kind of thing. So I'll draw it this time, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. So usually how Overwatch works, right, is you have a cone of an LOS like this, right? So this is kind of generally how you look and you see things when you're moving around, wherever you're facing. However, when you're scoping in, it's a little bit different, right? When you're scoping in, this cone has probably turned more into this kind of straight line here. It's that straight road ahead of you, and you can't see as wide as you want to. So another way to determine if you should scope or unscope is based off of safety. If you feel like you're safe, then you can look to scope in a little bit more, because then you don't have to be aware of your surroundings. You don't have to look around you, right? Whereas if you feel like you're unsafe, then you might need to maybe scope for one shot or two shots and then unscope so you can see around you, or don't scope at all and just keep shooting in an unscoped kind of range. Because remember, it does narrow your line of sight, so you need to make sure that you either are safe and you have somebody helping you out, or if you're unsafe, just keep a wider LOS so that you can see where your threats are coming from, so you can easily deal with them better. So below that, in terms of scope and unscope, I have quick scoping in there. So quick scoping is just when you quickly go from unscoped, going to scope, and then shooting, and then unscoping again. So it's almost, instead of it being you staying in scope for 2 seconds or 3 seconds, you pretty much are doing the action of unscope to scope in a matter of maybe a second, half a second, something like that. And the reason for that is it's so that you can be a little bit more accurate. So remember, scope is hit scan, unscope is projectile. So it's harder or easier to miss projectile aiming versus hit scan, because again, hit scan is instantaneous. Projectile, it takes some time to get to the target. So you can miss the target. Hit scan, it's instant. So it allows you to move quickly to a target and then easily be able to hit them and instantly get that damage or healing down. The other thing you need to keep in mind of why you might want to do a quick scope kind of thing like that as well is back to my point of having a bigger LOS. If you have a bigger LOS and you can see your threats coming, it's probably more likely that you want a quick scope so that you can see those threats in front of you comparatively to when you're scoped. Because when you're scoped, again, narrow line of sight there, right? So it's a good thing. It's a little tool you can bring out once in a while versus just always unscoping or scoping. All right. So we talked about when to use which aim styles. Let's move on to the next point, which we will look into as positioning. So Anna with her positioning. A lot of the times, for people that don't know, I like to kind of do a starting position. How do you start in terms of when, before the fight even starts or as the fight is starting? So the first second, maybe pre-fight, and then middle of the fight or the end of the fight. So when the fight is over or as the fight is happening, how do we look to approach things? So most of the time when you want to start towards a far to medium range. So again, thinking about it, what's a far range? What's a medium range? Well, medium is not on top of your teammates, but a little bit, maybe, I don't know, a few character models behind them. And then far is just, you have to, let's say, be on the other side of the map kind of thing. So the reason why you don't want to be super close to your teammates at the start is just simple. You don't want to get rushed on. As Anna, you're a very vulnerable target, right? You're a squishy character. You don't have large damage. You're a healer at best. You want to make sure that you aren't the reason why your team is losing fights first, and you don't want to die instantaneously from that, right? So having that far to mid range to start is how you want to position as Anna, so that you aren't able to get engaged on first and you don't become a casualty right away. Because once you go down, that means majority of your healing is down for your team. So you need to be very careful as Anna how you start. But towards the middle to the end of the fight, now that is when you look to play a closer range. That's when you go to the middle to close range. Close range being relatively almost right on top of your teammates or close enough to where they're pretty much right in front of you. And this is so that you can be in an area where you can enable your team more easily. So I'll talk about what determines how you should look to reposition and what you should do when you're moving to reposition. But the big thing is, just think about it like this. When you start, you don't want to be a casualty, so you want to be a little bit further back. in the middle to end, that's when the fight is either going in your favor or going less in your favor. That's when you want to try to become closer to your teammates so they can assist you and so that you can assist them in an easy way. Which goes into ideal spots and anchors, right? So to look at it, if you think about Zen, for example, for the people that watch my Zen guide, or for people that have watched my other support guides like Break, for example, you know that I use the term anchor a lot. And an anchor is practically someone you can look to always reposition yourself if you need to. So most of the time, the main support, which will be a Lucio, it might be a Brig, something along those lines, they will be your primary anchor. So if you ever are lost, you look to see where they are and you position based off of them. They most of the time will be positioned a little bit further ahead of you. So you need to keep in mind you should be a little bit further back, and that should always be a good kind of position for you. Off tank is the other position. So off tank is the secondary tank. You see where they are. Again, if you can't find the main support's dead, you can look at the off tank to see how you should position. Most of the time, you don't want to be on top of a tank because you're a squishy character, right? You're a very low HP squishy character. You don't do a lot of damage. So you want to be quite further behind the off tank. So that will help you determine if you should walk forward if you can't really see them, or if you should be back a little bit more because you're too close to them. Again, these characters consist of Lucio, Brig for main support. For off tank, it's more so Diva, Zarya, Hog maybe potentially, or Roadhog I should say, sorry. So those kind of characters are the characters you can think about for off tank. Now for ideal spots when you can start to position, or maybe in the mid to end fight, those come from corners, walls, terrain, or high ground, right? So corners are great because you can look to use that to your advantage. Same with terrain, to where you can use it to reduce your hitbox so that it's not, again, remember, your hitbox is a circle, right? It's 360. So it's 360. If you have a wall though, right, let's use a line. If you have a wall like this, then that means they can only hit you here, which means you only have a 180 degree hitbox now, right? So it's the same thing with corners, right? A corner is a head like this and it drops like that. If you're playing this side of the corner, your hitbox will be reduced, right? They can only see the front of your hitbox if they're attacking from this way, which means your hitbox is 180. Then if you go behind this corner, your hitbox is now 0. They can't see you. They have to pass the corner to see you. So it allows you to move around, and it's the same thing for walls. Walls kind of do the same thing. It reduces your hitbox so that you either take no damage or less damage and are in a less threatening position. High ground is a good situation because it makes them have to look in a different way, right? Instead of being on the ground at the same target as everyone else, you're in a position where in order to kill you, they either need to put their crosshair incredibly high up, which allows your teammates to be able to surround them or get good positioning. Or the other thing to kind of think about is high ground allows you to be in a safe position to where if they need to dive you or if they need to close distance on you, they have to use a lot of cooldowns in order to get to you, or a lot of abilities to get to you, right? Or they have to try to take a lot of space from your team, which they might not be able to do properly, right? Now from positioning, this goes to movement and threat assessment, sorry. So what do I mean by movement and threat assessment? So what I mean by this is very simple. When I talk about movement, I want a yellow color, not a blue color. When I talk about movement, I'm talking about how do I know when to move? It's simple. When do I press my W key? When do I walk forward? When do I walk backwards? When do I walk side to side? And I split this up into two kind of big things. They kind of go hand in hand, the movement and threat assessment, sorry. So we'll look at it in two trains of thoughts. When should I look to reposition? So when should I look to move? And this is during the mid-fight area. So we have just started. We're in our far to medium range. The fight is now in the mid-fight. It's been going on for a few seconds. Now, how should I reposition? What's the key things that I look for to reposition? Well, here's a few points that allow you to understand if you should. If you're up numbers. So again, remember, Overwatch is a 6v6 game. 6v6. So what happens if instead, if this is your team and you have the 6, what happens if they have the 4? Well, now you should look to reposition yourself into a more aggressive position or a more favorable position. Why? Because your team has a very key advantage. The way you want to push that advantage is you want to group up and you want to look to kill the other 4 members, right? There is no safer area, and I have to stress this enough with squishy characters. There is no safer area when you're ahead in a fight than your own teammates. So don't run away from your teammates. Don't stay where you are. You want to always be in range of where the fight is happening, and you always want to be in a range where people can help you. If you run away from your own teammates, they won't be able to help you, right? So when you're up in numbers, you can look to reposition. You can take a more aggressive position. You can look to move. It's vice versa the other way around, right? Let's say that instead this was reverse. You guys have the 4, you have the 6. That could still be a winnable fight, but you need to now make sure, well, how do you want to position? Well, maybe instead of moving forward, you're going to move to a different location, maybe a little bit more to the left. Maybe you're going to move further back a little bit more because of where the fight is happening. Or maybe because you know that if you die, the fight will no longer be winnable, right? Which goes into the next point. Main threats are down. So main threats are threats to you individually as Ana. So when certain threats are down, using some of those as an example, Tracer, Winston, right? Diva. So let's say that Winston goes to dive you. Winston has now died. Well, the only other person that might be able to dive me now is Tracer. Tracer might be able to dive me, but if I have another character like a Lucio or a Brig by me, then I can walk forward and I should be safe because I'm approaching that fight instead of a 1 versus 1 into a 2 versus 1. So I have help in order to kind of help me move forward and not have to deal with that individual hero on my own. Well, what happens if Tracer's dead and Winston's alive? Well, Winston is low HP, maybe Tracer is dead. I can now walk forward and assist my team because I don't have a threat that can potentially jump onto me and kill me, right? So again, when main threats are down, it means that you have the freedom of movement, the freedom of space to decide where you want to go. And again, a lot of it will come down to where the fight is happening, which goes into the next point, which I keep going back to. Fight zone. You want to fight in the zone that your team is fighting in. Let's say that your team is fighting a little ahead of you, right? You can't see them. They're out of your LOS. You can't heal them. Well, you need to move. You need to reposition yourself, because if you don't reposition yourself, that means your team will not get heals. And if your team can't get heals, in a 6 versus 6, well, that's a problem. If the enemy team can heal them and you can't heal your teammates, then you're probably going to lose that fight slowly, even if you do have an advantage. So keeping in mind if you can see your teammates or if your teammates can see you is a big thing in terms of how or when you should reposition. The last thing to determine if you can move forward or move around more freely is your own cooldowns. And we'll talk about how to utilize your own cooldowns in a little bit. But a big thing you need to keep in mind is, do you have your cooldowns up? Do you have your sleep dart up? Do you have your nade up? If you have Sleep Dart or Nade up, well, yeah, you can be more self-dependent now, which means you can deal with 1v1s in a much safer way. So if you can deal with 1v1s in a much safer way, then that means you can walk forward a little bit more. Maybe you can position solo by yourself. Maybe your Brig needs to walk up to help your teammates. Well, you can still walk up. You have cooldowns to keep you alive, heal you, and you have cooldowns to be defensive that can enable you through CC, right, with the sleep again. So then we looked at when you should reposition, right? But how do you reposition? What determines how you move to reposition? Well, I have 3 key points for that. And the thing you need to keep in mind is you want to move from terrain to terrain. So like I talked about before with the ideal spots, you want to move from wall to wall. You want to move from maybe a car to a car. Maybe you want to move from corner to corner, right? You always want to have some sort of cover around you so that you understand where you should kind of go to. The next point is just be close to your team. Don't be farther from your team. Like I said, when you're up numbers, when you're looking to assess threats, the safer place is close to your team, not far away from your team. So go towards your team when you're moving. Don't go away from your team. The closer you are to the team, the easier it is to help you. And lastly, look for your anchors. Like I said, you have your main support as your primary anchor and you have your off tank as your secondary anchor. You need to keep in mind where your anchors are at all times. If you're ever lost, if you ever aren't sure because you don't know if you should move to your team or you don't see a terrain that's close by, look to see where those people are. Look to see where your primary or secondary anchor is. Because then that will determine and help you identify how you should position, or if you should walk forward, or if you need to move around to a more defensive position, right? So that's movement, threats, and assessment, right? So movement and threat assessment, sorry. So now we kind of looked at it from that kind of point of view. We've looked at the general fundamentals. Let's look at the cooldown specifically for Ana now, right? So Ana has 3 main cooldowns at her disposal, aside from obviously healing and dealing damage. The other thing you have to keep in mind is the first cooldown, which we'll talk about, is her Nade. So her E. So her Nade can do one of 2 things. It can cancel out healing from the enemy team if it lands onto the enemy heroes, or if it lands onto yourself or your own teammates, you can have amplified healing, or it can heal them as well. So, how do you determine when you should anti-nade, so cancel the healing from the enemy team, or when you should heal yourself or your teammates or amplify that healing? Well, 3 key points to determine this is tempo, who is the person engaging or who is the team engaging, and who needs to utilize this nade. Is it myself or is it my team? So, to kind of explain in a little bit more of a looser way, tempo, first versus second tempo. What does this mean? Well, tempo is generally defined or explained as who's going to make the first move. Who is going to set the pace. So it can be used as a pace kind of thing as well. So most of the time, if you're going to go first tempo, you're engaging first, you're the first person to make the move, you will likely utilize your nade in a more aggressive way, which means you'll utilize it to cancel enemy healing. Because you are the ones making the first move, you won't need to utilize this nade in a defensive manner to keep your teammates alive, right? It might have a secondary use for that, but the main use that you're going to look for when you go first tempo is to be able to burst somebody down, kill them instantaneously. And that is what that anti-nade will do. If you're going second tempo, so the enemy team is going before you, or you're looking to absorb their aggression, well then, probably what you're going to look to do then is you're going to look to use your nade more for healing, more in a defensive purpose to keep people alive on your team. You might cancel healing out from an enemy player, right? But the main purpose is to keep people alive, or even yourself alive. It's not meant to kill anyone, right? Next one is who is engaging, and this goes back to first and second tempo. First tempo, again, most of the time you're going really, really fast. Second tempo is you're the slower team. You're going quite slow. In terms of engagement, if you're engaging, probably use it to anti. If you're healing, probably use it to heal. The last point is solo use versus team use. Well, if you're going to use it for yourself, well, that probably means you're likely going to look to use it to heal yourself and keep yourself alive for as long as possible. If you're going to use it for the team, you can use it to heal your teammates, yes, based off of tempo, but you can also use it in a way to enable their engagements, right? So, again, you can use it in other ways aside from just for your team to keep your teammates up. You can use it for yourself to keep yourself up too, right? Or maybe you expect yourself to be used as bait. Let's say that you know they're going to dive you as Ana. You can use the nade to anti the players that will be on you and make it so that your team can kill them after they kill you. So you get a nice little trade there. So Nade, nothing really, I would say, insane about Nade. It's a very simple cooldown. It's more about when you should use it to help yourself and heal versus when you should use it to cancel out healing for the other team. This is probably one of my favorite topics, talking about Ana, to be honest with you, her sleep usage. And why do I love talking about her sleep usage? Because I feel like a lot of people don't utilize sleep properly. I feel like they use it off cooldown, and what I mean by off cooldown is they will use it just to sleep somebody or just because they have it up right now. But there is a way where you can almost hit sleeps majority of the time. There are times when you can look to kind of think about when's the best way to use sleep in terms of, do you use it towards the later part of the fight? Do you use it in the early part of the fight? What is the thought process behind it? So looking at the early thought process behind it, if you want to use sleep before the fight has started or in the first couple of seconds, you can look to utilize sleep to stop an engagement from an enemy. So if you see a ball going for a slam, you see a monkey going for a jump, you see a rush, so a Rhine, a Lucio, maybe a Reaper looking to run at you, you can utilize sleep to stop or to slow down the engagement or make it weaker, right? The other way you can look to utilize it is similar to kind of off of cooldown, but if you see teams group up, start walking at a choke to make the engagement or to make kind of the fight a little bit less scary, you can look for an aggressive sleep if you're set up in a position right when they walk out a choke. You can look to utilize it because it'll be grouped up, it'll be easier to hit. They'll walk out together. You'll be able to hit maybe not a key target, but you'll be able to hit probably out of the 4 targets walking out of a very tight area, you'll be able to hit one of the 4 targets, right? And that goes into mid to late fight. Well, why should I use my sleep in the middle of the fight or later in the fight. You could use it to shut down a key ultimate. So maybe Sombra will go for an EMP. Maybe Monkey is looking to primal into your backline, or maybe he has a primal to keep himself alive. Maybe Genji's going for a blade, right? If you can land the sleep onto those characters, you cancel out those ultimates, and if they stay asleep, specifically using blade or primal as an example, you burn out the duration of that ultimate, making their ultimate useless. EMP is an example of an ultimate where if you sleep them, even if they get waken up instantly, you cancel out that ult because you cancel it with the CC at the start, right? The other way to think about using your sleep in the mid to late fight is yourself. Again, solo. And there's so many people I know that since they use it off cooldown, they aren't using it to protect themselves. That's either you being rushed down or dove. That's you being in a 1v1 with a character like Tracer. You can use it as a way to keep yourself alive for a longer period of time, similar to Nade. So again, you got to think about it kind of like that. If they're trying to go for a 1v1, if you have sleep still alive, there is a potential, for example, using Tracer again. That Tracer goes for a 1v1 against you, and you can sleep her. And once you sleep her, you can kill her. Or you can force out a key ability in her recall and force her to not be able to go as aggressive or go to kill you later in those fights. So it can be a great tool to protect yourself. So I talked about the thought process of when to use it early, when to use it towards the middle to late fights. Now, how can you hit sleep every single time? Now, again, I talked to a few people about this, and I've looked at this over the course of multiple years kind of coaching, and there's two kind of thought processes that I look to kind of utilize in terms of when can you look to hit your sleep, or how can you look to hit sleep every time. And these are always the two things that came to mind, or the two things that I noticed a lot when it came to Ana sleeps. So the first thing first is the enemy hitbox, right? We talked about hitboxes a little earlier with scope versus unscope. The closer you are to either your teammates or the enemy, the bigger your hitbox is, right? Or the bigger their hitbox is. So that means, as scary as it sounds, if you look to have the enemy hitbox as close as possible to you, it guarantees you to hit the sleep every single time. Is it scary? Absolutely. Because you could die. It is very possible that you could die. But if you work around that timing and you don't panic when they're very close to you, you can hit the sleep guaranteed because their hitbox, again, using the example, far away, they're like this. Very close, they're like this. Which one would you rather hit, the big circle or the tiny circle, right? Again, easier to hit. It can happen multiple times, right? And you can shut down pushes. The only issue with this one is, again, you can die very fast if you miss the sleep. Or even if you sleep one and there's multiple other targets coming on you, you could die to the other targets. But it can help you. It's, again, a way you can guarantee almost hitting the sleep every single time. It's a way that I don't see a lot of Anas use, but it is a way that I see some of the top Anas or more known Ana players use their sleep. Because they're not scared of dying, because they'll have their nade still alive, or they'll have break to pack them or heal them with inspire, or maybe even they know that they won't be able to die right away or instantly, right? So they look to wait to see if the enemy can get closer to them, then they'll look to sleep that way. Now the second way is a little bit more safe. It's a little bit more specific, and it's a little bit more, I would say, not logical, but it relies a lot more on game knowledge than it does on making it super easy for you. And that's looking for specific timings. So my best way to explain this is if you think about the peak of when a tank dives. So for example, when Monkey jumps, he hits a peak. So if I think about it like this, right? I'll use Monkey and Ball as an example. When Winston, so when W jumps, he'll be at a peak, which is like right here, right? And then he goes under, right? And this is when he lands. Well, he will always be at this peak. There will always be the peak no matter what. And that's when he's at his most vulnerable, is at the peak of his jump. You can look to make sure that you hit that specific timing whenever he always peaks for his jump, when he's at the highest point of his jump. It's the same thing for Wrecking Ball, right? If I utilize Ball, when Ball goes for a slam, Ball always does the same animation, right? He goes up, and then he hits a peak, and then he slams right down. But you need to remember, yes, I know that Ball slams down really fast, but around this area, right, when he passes that line and he goes up to go to the peak, that is a very slow animation. You can hit him right at the peak and stop him, or you can flail him right out of that peak if you can get the timing down every single time. And again, this is a type of thing where practice makes perfect. If you want to do it like this, instead of waiting for the hitbox to be right in front of you so it's easier to hit, you can do this so that you memorize the timing, you know what the timing's like, and you can hit it and confidently be like, I know this is when he's going to be at his peak. I'll sleep him. Then he becomes non-threat, right? Other example, it's a little bit weaker, but when Tracer is low blinks, when you see her blinking around, once you know she has one blink left or she has no blinks left, you can look to go sleep, right? So you know specifically she has to keep dodging you, especially if you have a nade up or if you're shooting or someone else is shooting at her, or you're using a terrain to kind of make it harder for her to hit you. She has to blink so she can get onto you much more easily, or so she can dodge your shots. Once you know she's used one or two blinks, you can think to yourself, okay, she probably has one blink. She doesn't have any more blinks left. If I force her to have to use that last blink, she'll have to recall again. And once she recalls, she will not want to commit on me anymore because she doesn't have a free ability to recover her health, be in a much safer position, etc. So again, two lines of thought process of how to hit sleep every single time. But again, the first one a little bit easier because less logical, less thinking, more big target, I can hit that easily. Second one is more, I really need to think about it. I really need to train myself to do this. And it takes quite a bit longer to kind of get into the mindset. Both are a mindset. One, the first one being more fear. The second one being more understanding the timing and understand what you're looking for, right? So last but not least, talked about sleep, my favorite thing. Nano is the last thing. So Nano, again, looking at Nano, similar to Nade. It's a very self-explanatory ultimate. With Nano Boost, you receive HP, and you receive, once you get the Nano, aside from receiving instant HP, you're able to receive damage reduction, right? So if any damage that comes onto you is reduced, as well as you deal amplified damage. So there's three purposes of how you should look to use Nano and why you should use Nano. Number one, you're trying to keep somebody alive. Maybe they're trying to dive your McCree. Maybe they're trying to dive your Brig, right? If they're trying to dive a squishy target and you know that they are, before they burst them, you can look to Nano him, instantly gains the HP back. He's very tanky, so now he can't instantly die. Then you push on through and he's able to kind of just push out and you survive the initial engagement, the initial burst that they have, and then you guys can look to win the fight through longevity. Second way to look at it, a powerful ultimate. You're looking to enable a powerful ultimate to clean up multiple targets. Maybe it's a Genji Blade. Maybe it's a Blossom from a Reaper, for example. It's a good ability that has the high potential of playmaking, either through individual skill or AoE damage, right? And those kind of ultimates, again, Nano reduces the amount of damage you take, and it can look to amplify that damage as well. So it can help you clean up those fights a lot faster. It can help them stay alive for a longer period of time. Might not use the instant HP, but it's still something, right? Last but not least, it's to enable a carry character or hero, maybe that doesn't have an ultimate, to pressure or push very aggressively. So using Reinhardt as an example, or Echo as an example, you could give Nano to a Reinhardt in a brawl comp, and when you walk forward, Reinhardt can just get a Nano and he starts swinging. If he's going to start swinging, he's going to hit three people. He's going to be able to swing for longer periods of time because of the damage reduction, and he's going to hit a lot harder as a character as well, right? Because of the amplified damage as well. Or maybe you're going to put it on an Echo. Echo doesn't need as much healing. Echo can look to assassinate more targets while she's in the air, right? Again, it allows specific or individual characters to be more independent. Not fully independent, but enough to a point where they can look to take the game more into their own hands, right? And those are kind of the key things. Those are the key points or the key things that I kind of talked about with Anna that we can look through. Now, we talked about Anna. Let's now take this out and let's look at some gameplay, guys. Okay, we're chilling. All right. So, I will play this at 1 and I'll slow it down to 0.75 when I feel like I need to. We look at Crimzo right now. Looking at positioning, we're thinking to see where he should go. He's thinking that he should start the position on high ground, makes him less vulnerable to dive. It increases the distance quite significantly. If they do try to dive him, Jake can look to flail somebody off. It will land to a much easier sleep from Crimzo as well. He's in a good area to where he can nade if Houston wants to go aggressive first. He's in a very good position here, I would say. Alright. Nade on his team. The D.Va ate the nade. He runs away. Glad set it up. Where did he fail there? He went way too aggressive there. He peeked on the left side instead of playing a safe or back position. And when he dropped away from his team. He didn't drop towards his team. So he isolated himself there. So the idea of playing that high ground there was good, but the execution was really poor there. Because he got impatient. He looked to potentially get a sleep on somebody instead of looking to do something else. Crazy nade lands. Alright. He knows the fight's over. He's kind of just throwing his CDs or his cooldowns off cooldown just because he knows the fight's over. He has some time. They'll come back up by the time the next fight starts. So he does have the nano. He looks for a sleep at the choke here. Let's see how he looks to use his nano here. I'd assume he's going to look to use the nano on the monkey as they walk in, but we'll see what ends up happening. Key thing, he uses this as a way to dodge the MP. As the enemy team looks to go onto him, he's backing up. He can't see his team here now, so he looks to get in a better LOS so that he can heal his teammates. He looks to see where his second anchor is. He sees his D.Vas right in front of him. He sees his D.Vas taking space. He sees his monkeys creating a lot of space. He's looking to move forward. He's looking to enable them. He looks for a sleep in an area to keep up his monkey. They're unable to do so. And now he's in a bit of a poor position because he wasn't able to keep his monkey alive there. We see that he's able to, again, kite back and forth very well. He's now taking space because his teammates are, or his team is up multiple members here. As he's taking space, he's close to his team. He's trying to use this number advantage to his favor. He knows he's safer close to Jake, and he knows he's safer towards his tanks here. As he sees the enemy team regroup, he moves back. He looks for an aggressive nade as his team walks forward. So again, based off of the number advantage there, we're seeing him go forwards or backwards. We're seeing him walk aggressively and look for an aggressive nade or look for a defensive nade if they go first. Again, we're seeing multiple things go into play here. We're seeing tempo go into play. We're seeing in terms of what we do with our nade when we're second tempo or first tempo. We're seeing how are we using our movement, how are we positioning ourselves. A lot of good things here overall from Crimzo. Alright, we have another nano up. He starts in a position to where he can scope. Nano his monkey instantaneously there. He's looking to use nade to keep him alive. Again, using those ultimates more so to keep alive than to enable. As they walk forward, they look to walk forward because they have to obviously touch the point. He walks forward so that he can go based off of where the fight zone is. Again, we're seeing a few quick scopes here. We also saw a sleep try to come out from Crimzo there while Monkey was going at the peak of his jump. We saw Monkey block it with a bubble there. So very good play from Muse. But overall, so far from Crimzo, based off the stuff that we have talked about, right? As we're kind of going through, we're seeing a lot of stuff with positioning. His start position, again, he's staying far to a medium range. As the fight is ending, he's closing the distance to his team so he can enable them. They can keep him alive. He's always looking for his anchors, his off tank or his main support. Again, playing a lot of walls. Not really corners, but a lot of walls. And he's always moving from terrain to terrain, or he's moving when he knows that he is not in the fight zone of his team, right? Seeing a lot of aggressive nades and, again, passive nades from Crimzo as well for healing and anti-healing. So, again, it comes down to the tempo. We're seeing that a lot of times when his team wants to go first, he's going for the anti. When his team is looking to be on the back foot and the enemy team is making the first move, he's using it more for healing either himself or for healing the enemy team. We're not seeing a lot of sleep usage being used like I described to hit every time. We saw him use it towards a very slight choke area at the start, but aside from that, we haven't seen him use it that much more anymore. Alright. I believe he's on Ana this whole map, if I remember. So we'll see how this goes. Okay. Sleep goes out. He tries to do it from a choke. It gets eaten by the enemy D.Va there. So again, now you're seeing he's being very cautious about them looking to close space and rush into them. Even though they don't have a Lucio, he still needs to be careful of not being the first one to be engaged on or in, or give them the opportunity to engage on him. So you're seeing he's seeing that his Brig is walking forward. He's looking to move forward a little bit. He messed up a little bit here because he didn't walk to the right with Jake when he should have. He instead stayed in the main because he was really scared that he was going to get rushed. He used Nade for himself. Use Sleep to try to go for the deal that either would go on him or goes on his team. Again, now he's in a poor position. You're seeing that Crimzo, even though in this kind of composition, you see he's struggling a little bit of when to move forward or where to move to. Alright. Oh, sorry. Pressed the wrong button there. Back up. Oh, forward. Alright. I think we go forward here to right here. There we go. Okay. As I was saying, we're seeing that Crimzo is struggling with taking space a little bit. He's not effectively taking space properly. He doesn't know when he should walk forward, when he should walk backwards into this team composition. I would say even though they are a little bit more of a rush variation, he should look to play a little bit more aggressive because he can't heal past the shield. So he either needs to be on some sort of high ground or he needs to look to rush and play a little bit more aggressive with his team. Because see how they're using the wall to block off his healing, or they're using the Arista shield to block off his healing. He is always isolated and never in a good LOS, or line of sight, to see where his teammates are and heal them properly. So Gladiator's doing a fantastic job of isolating Crimzo from his team, or isolating the team from Crimzo. But Crimzo needs to identify this, and he needs to step up, and he needs to walk a little bit closer with his team. Because if they close the distance onto him, he can just anti-nade a large portion of them. And from there, he kind of has to just like kite or go backwards. Again, he's playing very far back at the start. He's using Jake as his anchor there. But from being so far back from his team, Gladiators are instantly able to just isolate Jake or isolate the team and make it so the Crimzo can't heal anymore. So doing a fantastic job of zoning Crimzo right now. Crimzo has Nano. He has all his cooldowns available. It's last fight, so they're going to have to rush to touch the point here. We'll see. He'll probably look to use the Nano on either D.Va or Monkey for a touch. Alright. Genji has Blade too, so they're going to use it actually on Genji instead for the Blade. You see that he plays a little bit closer so he can try to get the healing down. He does get rushed on with the Mei ult, but he's able to get that Nano onto Genji. Again, instead of using it on a tank like I thought to be able to touch the point, he uses it to have an impactful ultimate with the Blade. It does pick up a lot of members, but again, not enough versus the rush from Glads, especially the Blizzard. Blizzard was able to catch a lot of members. Dante wasn't able to go big enough with the Blade. It's going to be a scrappy fight, but Gladiators do have the numbers, I think, right now to potentially close this out. Bomb comes out. He uses cover. Again, Crimzo can't see anyone right now. He has to wait for the wall to disable. They don't touch the point. Again. Overall, Crimzo looks okay. Where does he struggle? What does he do well? He does very well in terms of not being scared of walking with his team, regrouping with his team, especially when he has an advantage. What else does he do really well? Well, again, looking at our points, he's positioning himself, I would say, quite well for a starting position. He's doing a great job with movement. I see him moving in very good spots. The nade timing, again, in terms of when to anti and when to heal, very good. But the things that I really am not liking is his sleep timings. I feel like he could be using those sleeps a little bit later in the fights comparatively to so early when they're walking out of chokes. His scope versus unscope is okay, I would say. Again, he's using more unscope than scope because he's usually very close to his teammates. He doesn't have to scope in to get that instant healing, or they're not too far away from him. They're more of a medium distance. And then Nano, we're seeing a lot of Nano in the right ways, right? He's keeping someone alive. He enabled the powerful ult. A lot of different things, right? So, again, moving in mid-fight to end fight, that's where he kind of struggled. He struggled a little bit in terms of utilizing those sweeps in a more, I would not say aggressive way, but in a more of a way to enable him to be more aggressive. And the other last issue that I would say he kind of failed to kind of do was in terms of at the end there moving with his team. Even though he saw that he was in danger potentially at the start, he needs to move with his team. Again, the fight zone was consistently moving out of his LOS. He needs to move with the fight zone. He can't fight against that. So there's that. Numbani has a lot of corners. Numbani has some high grounds that you can utilize. It has some long distance, so we'll see probably a little bit more scope in versus unscope. I think it's a good map to look at. Alright. Where are we here? Alright, some alarm gameplay. Okay, we're going to do the same thing as before. It's at 5. Objective sound is off. Perfect. Okay, so something that I will say that is different between Crimzo and Alarm, a big thing with them, is Alarm. Crimzo is a much more aggressive Ana, so he uses his CDs or cooldowns very aggressively, so he doesn't really... I don't want to say he doesn't think about them, but he uses them more for situations that are less likely to hit or less likely to be effective compared to Alarm, who uses them, again, in much more effective scenarios. So we're going to see really good stuff from Alarm. I'm really excited to kind of show off Alarm's gameplay here, because he used to be like the GOAT on Ana as well. As I say that, he almost dies. But he tries to go for the sleep on Fair. He waited for Fair to try to go down a little bit on him. He almost hit the sleep. He was unable to. As that's happening, Nade instantly onto him and his break to keep him alive. He moves towards his Brig and Zarya to keep them alive. And now we're seeing him go towards Unscope and Scope. Again, he hits the sleep onto the Pharah. Tries to close the distance, wait for her to get a little bit lower. It might mean she hits more shots onto them, but he's able to hit a much more reliable sleep. We saw that he went in for Scope because Monkey was far away. He's trying to get instant healing as fast as possible, and we're seeing him go towards Unscoped and Scoped. That was a sick ass sleep. But again, lots of things happening at once. We're seeing a defensive nade. We're seeing a great way in terms of how to utilize sleep to hit it almost all the time, like we saw. Saw a 6 sleep at the end there. Great example of unscope versus scope. When to use scope, when to use unscope. Again, he is close now to a nano. So we see positionally, he starts a little bit further back. He sees that it's a little bit safer into where his anchors are. So he plays by his anchors. EMP goes on to the Pharah Mercy. The whole team moves towards that general area. Again, quick scopes to get instant kind of healing away, or instant healing active instead of over time, or it takes a second to kind of land onto the person. But again, seeing great stuff so far from Alarm. Loving his primary versus, like his scope versus unscope. Loving how I'm seeing him use his sleeps right now. Nades have been quite fantastic. In terms of mid fights, his positioning, repositioning to his team has been great. He sees Monkey jumps. He sadly gets EMP, so he can't use his CDs how he'd like to. He is kept alive there from Funny Astro. Fantastic sleep. He waits till they get into the doorway of the choke. He's able to instantly hit one of the two. Ends up being Lee J gone because Lee J gone flew into it. But again, you're seeing in a lot of situations as well, Alarm is in multiple situations where, oh my gosh, this is scary. Like, many Ana players I know would panic in those situations and be like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting jumped at, like I need help, I need help, I need help. Alarm is like calm, cool, collective. Like the guy is dropping down. He knows that he's EMP'd. He knows there's a Monkey with Nano or in a Pharah like coming towards him. He's just kind of walking away towards his teammates in an area where he has a corner. And again, tries to keep Zarya alive. He waits for the barrage to happen. He moves out of the bubble towards a corner so that he kind of can LOS the enemy team. He can also kind of group up and they have to peek into him. Look to use the nade to force out Diva Mech and try to get the anti onto that. Again, Beautiful. Surgical. He looks to scope in so that he can get the instant damage, instant healing down as well. Be a lot more accurate with his shots too. Guy is using terrain beautifully. I cannot express again how well this guy is using terrain. It is magnifique. Love it. All right, he has a nano. They're gonna wait to look to collapse probably here. He's probably gonna nano the monkey as they drop down. Monkey goes nano. He goes for an anti while monkey is zoning the supports. Ooh. First mistake I've seen. He goes away from his break that's rallying, and that potentially could be massive for the fight here. Big thing I will say though is he waited to sleep when the monkey was right on top of him. So he approached the cooldowns pretty well. Yeah, he's just doing this to try to get back faster, but he approached the cooldowns really well. But again, he split himself up when he had an advantage. And Shanghai almost ran away with that, but again, his team's able to kind of clutch it out towards the end there. But again, as we're waiting for the next round to start, I cannot express how much he's doing the first point here for sleep, how much he's utilizing this whole scope kind of point, how he's utilizing, again, movement and positioning. Everything that we're talking about, he's utilizing here. And it's wonderful to see. But the big things compared to Crimzo's perspective that he is using is a scope versus unscope. It is how to use this first point for sleep. Having them as close as possible. Being calm, cool, collective. Not freaking out when they're right on top of you. Right? Moving towards his team consistently. Not just in the middle of the fight. Sometimes he's doing it at the start of fights. Because he knows that it's safer in his team compared to away from his team. He's utilizing corners great as well. He's always looking for his anchors. This guy, again, top-notch player. He's showing through his gameplay how he is or was one of the best Annas in the game at this current time. It still makes me a little bit sad to watch this Alarm gameplay, because this kid, I remember playing against him in Contenders 2, he was incredible. He was probably one of the strongest support players up and coming, and he proved it in the league multiple times. Going back though into the gameplay here, we're seeing some good stuff here. Walking up with the team, again, unscope because he's quite close. It's pretty easy to hit. Alright, he's looking around consistently to see where his threats are as well. They're just building up a nano right now. You see that he's just healing. He's looking to make sure above him, to his left, to his right, if there's any threats. And right now he's just healing, trying to build up that ultimate, and they'll probably look to push in with that ultimate there, right? Alright, they have the ults. Let's see how they will look to approach this with the nano. How will he use the nano? Will he just look to use it on mono? Oh my gosh. Great sleep there from him. Instant pick on the Wrecking Ball as well. They're going to look to brute force their way top left. He sees that D.Va has walked out. He's going to start to walk out as D.Va takes a little bit of different space. And now his supports have high ground. Huge sleep onto Void there. Sees him by himself. He sees that he's in a close area. He knows that he can just hit that sleep instantly onto the Roadhog. He cannot dodge it. Only issue is from there, him dropping. Even though they get the kill on both tanks, they give up a lot of key positioning there as a team. That causes them to, again, struggle and give a lot of space to that Pharah. Pharah surrounds them with the rest of the DPS and supports online from Shanghai. Ball comes back. They're in a tiny room surrounded. Even though he did a great job with the sleep, going in an area that's very close quarter, he's able to hit it really easily. Again, he's walking and looking to see what characters are where, specifically his anchors, so that he can better understand if he should move forward or if he should move backwards. Doesn't really work out there because he gives up too much space. Again, a little too blood hungry there from Alarm. They do still have a nano here in this fight though, so they can go for a nano. So we see Mono jumps in as they're jumping in. He's waiting to see where EQO is so that he can look to nano EQO. They bait out mines. Again, we're seeing that he's playing far back. When he was playing far back, he went from instantly projectile healing or unscoped healing to scope. Great sleep again, utilizing the fact that Hog was going out of that corridor. Only issue is it doesn't look like they're able to go and capitalize off of the sleep that he got. He ends up nanoing Hop because they feel it's winnable. Hop was able to get the Hog, the Fair Mercy. Only issue right now is they're in a very poor position. Gets hooked, instantly killed. He tried to land the sleep there because Hog was in a very tight position between the cart and that doorway there. He felt he could confidently hit that sleep. Ends up getting hooked. The fight's over from there. So from there, like, it's already been 4 minutes. Fusion as a team has had multiple advantages, but thrown it away. In terms of Alarm's play, though, because we're looking at his Ana specifically, he has done a fantastic job in terms of moving around the map. The only thing that I would argue that he has not done too well in the mid-fight is he stabilized himself, done incredibly well, but once they have an advantage, instead of playing to enable his team and help them get the advantage, he has been very blood hungry with trying to land sleep and get kills with sleep and nade. Again, he's in this main area. He's in a scope range because he knows the distance is pretty far. He's trying to make it so that he can instantly get this healing down. Great boot from Mono, holy crap. Again, moves a bit closer to the ball so that he can instantly hit the ball there. And again, he's a little bit further away from his team, so he's playing towards the scope. He's trying to instantly heal his team as well, instead of having it be taking a little bit of time to go to his team. Tries to land the sleep onto Sombra. Unsuccessful, but again, positioning. He's around a corner. He's far back. He's using his scope to kind of make it a little bit closer range or instant healing kind of thing. Instantly hit. And he knows he's safe, so that's why he's in the scope, right? You see him kind of going in and out of scope sometimes when ball is around him or a potential another character is around him. But overall, he is utilizing that scope in an effective way. So, what do I have to say so far with that? Well, looking at this in terms of Ana, in terms of Crimzo, in that kind of short comp that we saw compared to the Numbani that we saw here, we saw fantastic work of scope versus unscope. When should you scope? When should you not scope kind of thing? Positioning from both guys. The starting position, very strong. End position, very strong. In terms of movement, we saw a little bit of a better job from Alarm than we did from Crimzo. But again, we saw all these points add up in terms of when you should look to reposition and how you should move. We saw them executed from both of those guys. In terms of nades, sleeps, yes, we saw how anti-nades were used more or healing nades were used more for individuals there. But the big thing there is we saw a difference between Crimzo's sleep usage and Alarm sleep usage of one using it as to get as close to the enemy hitbox as possible to guarantee a hit, the other using it for specific timings towards being in a choke, you know, looking to do it when certain characters were doing specific actions, peak of a jump, anything like that. And then Nano, we saw all three of those kind of usages coming alive. Keeping someone from dying, making sure to enable a powerful ultimate, right? Or to allow a character to potentially pressure and hard push the enemy team, right? Towards that fight when he nanoed Hoppa when it looked like a losable fight. They turned into a winnable fight by creating D.Va into a carry potential character through being able to deal more damage and being able to be a little bit more tanky with that damage reduction. So great stuff that we saw so far from Ana in terms of looking at Alarm gameplay and looking at Crimzo gameplay.